Something has been trying to get your attention. Maybe you've been waking up at 3 in the morning for no clear reason. Maybe a name or a memory keeps surfacing out of nowhere. The same one, over and over on completely ordinary days. Or maybe there's just this feeling you can't shake. Quiet, persistent. A sense that your life is standing at the edge of something even if you couldn't say what. Most people explain it away. Stress, coincidence, a phase, and then they move on. But here's the thing. Throughout history, across very different cultures, and completely different kinds of people, the same specific patterns show up in the period just before a major life change. Not dramatic, obvious signals, subtle ones. The kind that are easy to dismiss. The kind that most people only recognize looking back. We're going to go through 6 of those patterns today. And I'll tell you now, the last one on this list is the one almost nobody talks about. Not because it's rare, because it's hard to admit you're experiencing it without feeling like you've lost your mind. Pay attention, because what you've been brushing off lately might be saying something you actually need to hear. Before we get into the list, just this. You're not imagining things. These experiences are more common than most people realize, and they tend to cluster around moments of real change. You don't need to believe in anything specific to recognize them. You just need to be willing to look at your own life honestly. Let's start with something that happens in the middle of the night. Sign number 1. You keep waking up between 2 and 4 in the morning. You fall asleep without any trouble. Then, somewhere around 2, 3, maybe 4 in the morning, you're awake, completely awake. The house is still, nothing is wrong, and yet, there you are, staring at the ceiling, with thoughts that feel heavier than they do during the day. This isn't just a sleep pattern. Notice what happens in those hours. What surfaces? There's a reason the early morning has historically been treated as a different kind of time. In contemplative traditions across the world, in the journals of writers and thinkers who describe those pre-dawn hours as the only time the real thoughts could get through. The noise of daily life is gone. The distractions are gone. And whatever has been waiting for your attention finally gets a window. If you've been waking up consistently in those hours, don't just reach for your phone. Sit with it for a moment. What's there? What thought keeps returning the second the room goes quiet? Because usually, the thing that wakes you up is exactly the thing you've been working hardest to avoid thinking about. Sign number 2. Repeating numbers. Keep pulling your attention. You glance at the clock. 11, 11. The receipt total catches your eye in a way you can't explain. The same number appears on a license plate, then a building, then your phone screen, all within the same day. You notice. You probably dismiss it. And then it happens again. Here's what's actually worth paying attention to. Not the specific numbers, but the fact that you're noticing at all. The psychologist Carl Jung spent a significant part of his career studying what he called synchronicity, the way meaningful patterns appear to cluster around transitional moments in a person's life. He wasn't a mystic. He was a scientist who kept encountering this phenomenon and couldn't explain it away. What that heightened noticing usually signals is a shift in awareness. Something in you is becoming more alert, more tuned to detail, to pattern, to signals that were always present, but previously invisible. That shift in perception tends to precede a shift in circumstances. So, don't fixate on what the numbers mean. Ask yourself, what's changed about the way you've been moving through the world lately? The next sign isn't something you see. It's something that's been sitting inside you, and it won't sit quietly anymore. Sign number 3. A restlessness you can't explain and can't shake. Everything looks fine from the outside. Stable, normal. No crisis. No obvious reason for disruption. And yet, there's this low hum of restlessness just beneath the surface. A feeling that something needs to change even when you can't name what it is. You might find yourself questioning routines that used to feel automatic. Feeling oddly disconnected from things that used to matter. pulled towards something unfamiliar, something you can't quite see yet. This feeling is uncomfortable. It's supposed to be. Restlessness like this isn't a malfunction, it's friction. The friction that happens when the person you've been doesn't quite fit the life you're currently living anymore. Like a shoe that's half a size too small, you can walk in it, but every step reminds you something isn't right. Think back. Is there a time in your life when restlessness like this eventually led somewhere real? For most people, looking back honestly, the answer is yes. That restlessness was the first signal of a turning point long before the turning point had a name. It wasn't telling you something was wrong. It was telling you something was coming. What comes next on this list is harder to sit with because it arrives from somewhere most people aren't expecting. Sign number 4. Old memories keep surfacing unexpectedly. You're doing something completely ordinary, washing dishes, driving, standing in line, and a memory arrives. Not a recent one, an old one. A moment from years ago, maybe decades. A face, a conversation, a version of yourself you thought you'd put down a long time ago. It arrives without invitation, and it doesn't leave quickly. There's usually a pattern to which memories come back. They tend to orbit unfinished moments, a path you didn't take, something you never said, a loss that got buried under the weight of everything that came after. They don't return to punish you. They return because something in you is finally ready to do something with them. Psychologists who study emotional processing describe this kind of unbidden memory as the mind surfacing material that's been below conscious attention, not randomly, but when there's enough psychological safety to finally look. Something in your life right now is creating that safety. If old memories have been visiting you lately, they're not asking you to live there. They're asking you to look clearly at what you've been carrying so you can decide whether you still want to carry it. That's a form of preparation. For what? That's what the next sign begins to answer. Sign number 5. Certain people are quietly leaving your life. No dramatic ending, no fight, just a slow, almost invisible fading. A friendship that was once central is somehow distant now. A relationship you used to rely on feels like it belongs to a different chapter. Maybe you're the one pulling back, and you don't entirely know why, only that it feels both strange and, underneath that strangeness, somehow necessary. This is the hardest sign to receive without interpreting it as failure. But here's what's striking. Almost everyone who's gone through a genuine life transformation, not just a surface level change, but a real shift in who they are, describes this same experience. In the period just before things moved, the people who fit the old version of their life gradually made room, not always gracefully, not without grief. What made space eventually got filled, but the space had to come first. If relationships around you have been quietly reorganizing lately, even painfully, it may not be evidence that you're losing something permanently. It may be evidence that your life is making room for something it hasn't been able to hold yet. And if that's true, then the 6th sign is the one that quietly confirms it. Sign number 6. You have a deep, quiet knowing that something is about to change, not excitement, not dread, exactly, something harder to name than either of those. It shows up in the most ordinary moments. You're in the middle of a regular Tuesday, nothing unusual happening, nothing dramatic on the horizon, and for a moment, you feel it. A calm, settled awareness that life, as you currently know it, is at some kind of threshold. That something is coming. You don't know what. You don't know when. You couldn't explain it to anyone without feeling slightly foolish. And yet, it stays. It doesn't panic. It doesn't shout. It simply waits, like something that already knows it's right. Across centuries, across cultures that had no contact with each other, people have described this experience in the moments before their lives changed in ways they never saw coming. It appears in personal letters, in private journals, in conversations between people who trusted each other enough to say the unsayable. It's one of the most consistently reported human experiences and one of the least discussed because there's no clean way to talk about it. This isn't wishful thinking. Wishful thinking is loud. It's anxious. It needs reassurance. This is different. This is quieter than hope and steadier than fear. And if you've been carrying it, this unexplainable, persistent sense that you're standing at the edge of something real, then you already know what I mean. Don't dismiss it. That knowing may be the most honest signal you've received in a very long time. Look at these 6 signs together for a moment. None of them announce themselves dramatically. None of them arrive with instructions. They move through ordinary life, through sleepless hours and unbidden memories, through restlessness and slow goodbyes, and a quiet inner certainty you can't quite justify. That's exactly why most people miss them. We're waiting for change to knock loudly. It rarely does. We open with a question: what if the things you've been experiencing lately aren't random? When one of these signs appears, you can explain it away. But when several of them arrive in the same season of your life, the sleeplessness, the restlessness, the old memories, the fading relationships, that quiet and unshakable knowing something worth taking seriously is happening beneath the surface. Awareness of that is not a small thing. It is, in fact, the first thing. The most significant changes in a person's life rarely begin with a dramatic event. They begin with a quiet noticing, a growing awareness that something has already started moving before anyone else can see it, before you can even name it. If several of these signs have felt familiar today, that's not something to be afraid of. It's something to move toward with open hands, with curiosity instead of control, with trust instead of panic. You don't need to know what's coming. You don't need a map. What matters is that you're no longer explaining away the signals. You're paying attention. And you were paying attention long before you arrived here today, which is probably why you're here at all. That feeling you started with, that something is about to change, it may have already begun.